exhaustion, and willingness to engage with an unpredictable narrative. Supporters disagreed about whether speaking up would make the situation better or worse. As interest increased, people's perceptions of the lack of reaction changed. More names were added to the story. Prior relationships were examined. Previous friendships were questioned. Timelines were altered to uphold ideologies that were only comprehensible to those who were committed to them. Harmless moments were paused, scrutinized, and treated as clues. The story changed from what could be confirmed to what people thought was true. Interpretation was used in place of evidence. Emotion took the place of logic. The situation was claimed to be very concerning for those who are allegedly close to it. It is nearly impossible to alter public narratives once they have solidified. A reputation may be destroyed in a matter of seconds, but it takes years to build one. Family relationships are strained under constant scrutiny. Mental health declines when every behavior is questioned. A few of insiders reportedly thought that the attention would soon fade. Others thought that the level of intensity had reached the point when withdrawing oneself would only raise suspicions. What are the complicated problems? Another was the merging of one's own past with societal norms. People discussed progress, mistakes, and the cost of living under constant surveillance. Some saw someone trying to protect herself from more harm while negotiating chaos. Others saw someone who refused to confront harsh truths. At the same time, both viewpoints gathered momentum, bolstering each other and keeping the conversation going. Fan communities collapsed as a result of the conflict. Younger audiences and older supporters got into arguments. Loyalty and skepticism clashed. Some sought accountability. Some demanded empathy. The language deteriorated as patients grew tired. Even unbiased observers were lured into the discussion. People were picking sides without realizing how little was truly known by the time the debate reached its peak. The original rumor has virtually vanished. Much beyond its initial beginnings, the story had evolved into a complex web of assumptions, emotional reactions, and unresolved problems. Despite the lack of official confirmation, the impact was already apparent. Perspectives had shifted. A betrayal of trust had occurred. Regardless of the truth of the accusations, the story itself had left a lasting impact that would be hard to erase. Everything became more intense as the conversation refused to slow down. For many onlookers, what had before felt like distant speculation became to feel personal. In addition to being unhappy with what they were hearing, fans also voiced their displeasure with how quickly the narrative had spiraled out of control. Those who had spent up watching her work described a strange sense of loss. It seemed as if a famous story had been suddenly and unexpectedly altered. Online sites continued to alter the discourse by suggesting that the alleged issues were not at all surprising. According to these claims, there have been instances over the years when insiders have surreptitiously questioned decisions, habits, and choices. There was enough pain to make some people uncomfortable in private, but nothing was recorded or uttered in public. Proponents argued that private disputes should remain private. Critics claimed that persistent whispers revealed unresolved issues that had been ignored for too long. As fans quarreled, attention shifted to how the demands of public life might have affected everything. Some claimed that constant examination results double life. One for the cameras and one for survival. They claimed that emotional loneliness often follows celebrity, leading people to seek praise in ways that are misinterpreted by others. Others vehemently disagreed with this line of thinking, contending that fame does not excuse negative actions. Impatience and empathy were at odds all the time, and emotions were running high. The familial angle was making the situation more intense. Old interviews reappeared, but this time they were viewed with suspicion rather than nostalgia. Viewers slowed down discussions to study tone, pauses, and facial expressions. Statements that had previously been encouraging were reframed as passive warnings. Unresolved disagreements that never truly went away were now considered temporary arguments. Supporters insisted that the signs had always been there, discreetly inserted into moments that seemed harmless. According to online rumors, the family's private chats had grown more hostile over time. There were reports of tense conversations filled with fear, denial, and exhaustion. People speculated that family members struggled to maintain her reputation while confronting hard realities. Supporters claimed that these disputes showed empathy and compassion. They were portrayed by critics as an attempt to limit harm rather than address underlying problems. Although neither side was able to provide any proof, both spoke confidently. Fans were responding from all directions. Some were furious because they said they felt deceived and that their trust had been irreversibly broken. Others urged patience and warned everyone that speculation can ruin lives. There were significant emotional hotspots in the comment sections where loyalty, rage, and despair collided. As people acquired different viewpoints, online friendships were put to the test. Everybody was sure they were defending something important. Then, as alleged comments from people in her social circle began to emerge, the discourse took a different direction, shifting around concern, confusion, and irritation, according to anonymous sources. These accounts suggest that even those closest to the incident were overwhelmed by the story's explosive expansion. Some reportedly wanted to speak up, while others were scared of adding fuel to an already raging fire. Silence was said to be a kind of protection as well as punishment. Depending on who was interpreting it, the health-related accusations remained significant. Plot, drastically changing its tone. Fear took the place of curiosity. Concern replaced the excitement. Fans debated whether discussing such rumors without confirmation was morally acceptable. Some argued that raising awareness was essential. Reiterating unsupported accusations, according to others, would only be harmful. But the discussion went on. No matter how disagreeable the idea made people feel, once it was revealed, it would not go away. Official sources remained silent. Constant, and that quiet became louder with each passing day. For people, every absence has meaning. Believed that the quiet was an indication of the truth. It showed self-control, according to others. The simultaneous transmission of all possible interpretations led to confusion rather than clarity. As time passed, it became increasingly challenging to discern between assumption and fact. The story expanded again as speculation grew increasingly intense. Former collaborations were reviewed. They reinterpreted casual interactions as something more. Timelines were adjusted to conform to theories that supported preconceived notions. Fans treated memories like evidence, dissecting them piece by piece. Instead than relying on facts, the narrative now relied on feelings, intuition, and collective interpretation. People close to the incident were reportedly growing increasingly worried about the long-term consequences. Once, damaged persons rarely fully recover their reputations. Family relationships can be damaged by constant pressure. Emotional well-being is negatively impacted when privacy is compromised. Several insiders reportedly thought the emphasis will soon change to something else. Others thought that since the tension had already reached a breaking point, receding would just heighten suspicion. The conversation began to have an emotional influence on the fan spaces itself. Some communities disintegrated due to disagreement. Others implemented rules to limit discourse in an attempt to reduce harm. However, the story continued to acquire popularity outside those boundaries. Reaching those who had never paid close attention before, curiosity drew them in. Controversy kept them involved. But the matter was made much more complex by the way their personal history blended with public expectations. As they talked about development, responsibility, and forgiveness, many put their own experiences onto the story. Some saw someone trying to cope with severe stress by making bad choices. Others saw patterns they believed were unavoidable. Both stories were coexisting and propelling the same conversation by the time the argument reached a heated rhythm. It was clear that the story had evolved considerably from its beginning. It was no longer confined to romantic relationships and rumors. It came to symbolize how quickly public opinion can shift and how emotion can have a significant impact on belief. Furthermore, the weight of that opinion continued to alter the narrative in ways that were challenging to control, even in the absence of confirmation. There was a noticeable shift in the conversation around the story as it developed. The curiosity that had driven the talk earlier began to meld with weariness, annoyance, and anxiety. There was more than just speculations that fans were reacting to. They were reacting to the psychological harm that those rumors were inflicting on everyone involved. Some admitted that they were uncomfortable to the point where they could no longer follow the conversation. But they couldn't turn away. Hesitancy was less appealing than unanswered questions. Online comments said that the pressure had gotten so bad that even small actions were being amplified. A delayed post, an unclear caption, and a liked comment that vanished minutes later. Everything was treated as a signal, whether or not these incidents were intentional. Some believed these were messages meant for listeners. Others argued that these were unnecessary actions, added to an already uncontrollable narrative. The expense of living was the subject of an increasing number of conversations while being closely watched. Fans talked on how being well-known may hide one's identity and expose one's shortcomings. Proponents said that no one's existence should be subjected to speculation. Critics countered that exposure comes with responsibility, and that recurrent scandals brought to light valid concerns. Emotions were running high as both teams defended. Own beliefs often based on personal experience rather than corroborating information. Family loyalty became a central topic in these conversations. When a loved one dies, people ask how much of the burden falls on family members. Is being closely examined? Some people considered silence to be a form of defense. Some saw it as avoidance. Fans replicated old family memories, but they did so with a tense and restricted perspective. Conversations that had previously been encouraging were reframed as cautious. Laughter was assessed for discomfort. There was talk that the sincerity of love was in doubt. Private conversations that took place behind closed doors were said to be tense. These narratives described situations in which frustration and anxiety intersected, making the search for a solution challenging. People speculated that loved ones found it difficult to strike a balance between honesty and preservation. This was seen by supporters as evidence of care. Critics saw it as image management. Neither side was able to corroborate anything. However, conviction had a greater impact on their confidence than proof. The narrative grew increasingly depressing as people began discussing long-term consequences. Fans were worried about the impact of constant criticism, privacy, and mental health. Some dismissed those concerns, arguing that empathy shouldn't be a justification for avoiding accountability. The difference widened, and language became more acute. The patience were thin. Subtlety disappeared. Conversations that began with interest became antagonistic as health-related accusations persisted. Pain got worse. Many questioned how such sensitive topics got up in conversation.